Hi, welcome to Scratching the Surface. I'm Jarrett Fuller, and this is my podcast about design criticism and practice. For this week's episode, I talked to the designer, educator, and publisher Sara De Bondt. Sara runs her own design practice and is the co-founder of Occasional Papers, which is a small publishing company that focuses on affordable books on design and architecture history. My first introduction to Sara's work, though, was the book Graphic Design, History in the Writing that she edited with Catherine DeSmit, and is sort of a meta look at graphic design history by collecting essays that challenge the dominant historical narrative in graphic design and raises questions about the role of gender, race, technology, and in how we talk about design history. In this episode, Sara and I talk about her background and early career working alongside people like Stuart Bailey, James Goggin, and Daniel Eatock, and how she kind of developed an expanded practice of her own. We talk about the importance of history in design practice and knowing and understanding design history. And we talk about what the design discourse can learn from bringing in texts from other disciplines outside of graphic design. I really enjoyed this conversation and love how Sara thinks about these things, and it was so great to learn about her and her work. So I hope that you enjoy this conversation with Sara De Bondt. I've been a fan of your work for a long time, both your work as a designer and Occasional Papers, but I don't actually know much about your background. I don't know kind of how you got into all of this, and so I kind of thought that'd be a good place to start. And I'm very interested in where your interest in design came from.
It's a long story.
I have time.
At the time, this was kind of late 90s, I guess. Graphic design in Belgium wasn't known at all. So I didn't even really know that it existed. And I was really struggling when I was in my last year of high school with what to do. And my parents were putting a lot of pressure on me to get a university degree, like study law or,
right,
something serious where you could make a living.
Right.
I don't know. I was looking at that, and maybe I was looking at art history or sociology, even acting. I really couldn't.
Oh, wow.
I was kind of interested in everything. And then I remember always being into making things, and looking at it from now that I'm a parent myself, I realized that my parents were really encouraging that. Maybe they didn't, parents were not so aware of it, but they did drag us to museums and churches, and they bought me stuff to make things with.
Yeah.
Well, we lived in the countryside, so in my holidays I'd be spending hours and hours making things,
right,
painting, or and it was always relational. It was always for other people. So I'd make brooches for my auntie or cakes for my uncle or whatever.
Yeah.
And then that kind of made me be interested in art, because we did go to see a lot of contemporary art exhibitions. And so one of the things I went to see while I was looking for what to do was I went to an art school. And I in my free time, I'd be studying acting. Not that I've ever done anything with it, but it was kind of a teenager getting rid of your anxiety.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Thing to do.
Yeah.
And in the art school, there was a graphic design department, and I bumped into a guy who was a parent of a friend of mine from acting class. So that was like a way to start to talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the things that were lying on the table were like menus for restaurants and things like that. And I thought that looked kind of fun, and also like a good combination of getting an income for art.
Yeah.
So compromise. And I went to do the entrance exam, and I got in, and I was just so happy.
Yeah.
That I just signed up.
Oh,
Without
wow.
thinking about it, I was almost kind of relieved. And then this art school, I guess in high school, we also had quite a good art school teacher who was also encouraging. But then when I enrolled, he's called Jeff Winnepenning's the parent of a friend of mine. He said, "Oh, Sarah, I don't think you're cut out for this. You're way too shy. I don't think you can." And at the same time, my dad, even though they've been supportive, at the time when I began, he said, "What if you're not good enough?"
Okay.
You need to be really good at it to be able to make a living. Blah blah. So, and those things kind of made me try really hard and to kind of prove myself, even whether I liked it or not. I guess.
I mean, that's so interesting. I have two questions kind of about that. The first one is, did you when you talked to your friend's parent and kind of saw the design program, were you aware, how aware of you or conscious were you that graphic design was a thing? Did you know that was even a career option, or was that kind of your first introduction to the discipline at all?
I think it was my first introduction.
Oh, wow. And then what was it? Was it just that these things were interesting, that menus and things, that someone made these?
I think it was that it was making things for other people, not just for yourself. And the fact that it looked like you could make a living with it, that there was a commercial aspect to it, that with fine art seemed much more daunting in a way.
Yeah.
I was also interested in, art history and sociology, and I guess those things were taught in that program.
Right.
Yeah.
My other question, and this is a little bit off topic of the normal types of questions that I ask, but it's curious hearing you talk about your background and that you were taking these acting classes also. And I find it really interesting that it was graphic design that then people said, what if you're too shy for this, or what if you're not good at this, but not acting, which feels like those things would be much worse in acting than graphic design. You know what I mean? Yeah,
but acting was never really an option. I never was any good at it. It was more like a hobby as a way to express myself, that I didn't enjoy being on stage. And I wasn't much of an actor, really. Just myself on stage. Yeah, I never did the big parts or...
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, because I feel like a shy person acting, that would be much more of a problem than a shy person doing graphic design.
Yeah, but I guess it has been useful. There were some techniques that have been helpful when doing graphic design. You do still have to talk to a client about your work.
Right. Yeah, and there's a certain, performance in even pitching work or something.
Yeah, and teaching and giving lectures, and maybe something we should teach in graphic design course a bit more. It's kind of presentation skills, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought a lot about just ideas of performance and kind of the performative nature of graphic design. I definitely think there's something to it that we could learn from that we're not really talking about much.
It's very true, yeah. It seems to be coming up also a bit more, no?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like it is. So when you feel, you get this a little bit of resistance kind of when you start doing graphic design or start studying graphic design, and it encouraged you to kind of work harder, to push harder, kind of prove yourself, to prove to everyone else. Were you also thinking at this time that this was going to be a career, and were you thinking about kind of how you wanted to work? Or I guess I'm kind of interested in, when did it switch from you have to prove yourself to, oh, this is actually a thing I really like to do and I'm really good at?
It was a gradual process. I think in the first year I was mostly really happy to be in an art school. I came from a really strict high school where I had to study Latin, and just being in an environment to be yourself and be a bit different was really exciting. And take drawing classes with other artists and things like that, and getting history of art. But in the beginning, in that school, we were not really taught by graphic designers. The guy I mentioned, Jeff, he was an artist, and the other teachers there was an illustrator and an advertising guy, but there was no typography or nothing. I think for the first 2 years.
Wow.
And then I kind of started to wake up a little bit. I think in the third year, I don't know if it was the third year or the fourth year, but I started reading things, and maybe it was I magazine, or there was a lot of influence also of Jan van Toorn, who was teaching at the Jan van Eyck Academy in Holland at the time.
Right.
And then I had to write my. How did this happen? Yeah, I was invited to go abroad. In Europe, they encourage students to take a term abroad in another country.
Okay.
So I applied to go to Leeds in the UK, but they canceled at the last minute. And they, oh, do you want to go to Granada in Spain? And I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
So I went there, and it was the first time I'd lived away from home. And I didn't speak the language. Very few people in Spain at the time spoke English, so it was quite hard to communicate. But it was so like mind-blowing to be in a different country and have to be independent.
Right.
And I guess Spanish people are a lot more open socially than Belgians. So I came home with a bit of a boost of energy. And then at the same time, we had to write our thesis, like our final thesis.
Yeah.
And put it about the social relevance of graphic design. And that made me read a lot of books. Like, what's that book? The Jan van Toorn book, Design Beyond Design.
Oh, right, of course. Yeah.
That one, and then this other one that came out, which was called The World Must Change, Graphic Design and Idealism.
I don't know that.
It's a really fantastic book about mostly Dutch design and, the relevance of design in society. And that just made me flip, because then I did my final degree project, which was, I think, really awful design-wise. I was trying to like question design.
Yeah.
And I questioned my tutors, and then I almost failed that year because I was kind of, starting to ask all these questions. What's design for? Where does it come from? Why aren't we taught any history? Blah. And I remember at that time, this was the fourth year, I applied to the Jan van Eyck Academy in Holland.
Okay.
And got in, and my tutors just in Belgium just didn't get it. And
your tutors at Jan van Eyck didn't get it?
No, in Belgium.
Okay.
In my old school, yeah. So in my final degree jury, there was only one member of the jury who sort of understood where I was trying to go.
Oh, wow. So where did that... this is interesting to me because I feel like I went through a very similar kind of process, right? I guess I was probably a little bit after you, but it was right after I graduated from college and I started working for the first time, where I started questioning all of these things and kind of, what is this for? Why, what is my job supposed to be? What value am I adding? And I'm always curious. This seems to be a theme that comes up with the people that I talk to, and I'm always curious where that kind of questioning came from. What was it about your education that made you ask these questions, or how did you even start going about asking these questions?
I think it was just through stuff I was reading and finding out that there were, other ways of doing things. And the Jan van Eyck Academy was very influential at that time. Mm-hmm. And the stuff I was seeing, like Job van Bennekom wrote like a really nice pamphlet about the role of the designer. I found that somewhere. I don't know. I guess it was always when I was in my teens, I was a bit of a kind of activist. Right. So it was part of who I was. I guess it didn't just come.
Yeah. And did that? Do you feel like that? I'm trying to think exactly how to phrase this. Do you feel like that thesis project has kind of really set the trajectory of your career since? Because it sounds like a lot of the things. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was kind of where your interest in design history came from. And it sounds like it's kind of very rooted in there from the beginning that you were thinking about design in this way.
Yeah, totally. It's really because, and I was never taught it. So I still feel like I need to catch up. I don't know as much as maybe other people who've studied it properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where I I'm going to skip around a little bit because this was something I was kind of wanting to say for a little bit later, but it makes sense now. Is what is that? Why are you kind of so interested in design history, or what is the this question sounds more argumentative than I mean it to be, but I'm kind of interested in the value that kind of knowing design history actually plays in your practice.
I think maybe it wasn't so much at the beginning. Now I feel like you just need to know your field. You
Yeah.
need to know what you're talking about. There's a really lovely Richard Hollis quote that talks about it. Like, I have to dig it out for you, but it's something he's like describing sitting next to a client behind a computer, and the client saying, "I want it bigger," and him saying, "Oh, okay, let's try it bigger." And the client and printing it off, and the client saying, "Oh, let's do it even bigger," and him saying, "Yeah, okay, all right." And then making the point that as long as you as a designer don't have the kind of baggage to know about your field, it's gonna be much harder to be able to defend it.
Right.
You need to know your stuff.
Right.
And I guess history is a big part of that.
And something.
It's explaining to someone why pink doesn't work, because pink was used, for this project by these people at that time, or I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and was something that I was really wanting to talk to you, especially about, because something I feel like kind of when I started asking these types of questions, I almost veered too far into the theoretical or the critical or the history part, and then almost so far where I was not even concerned with the aesthetics anymore, or what design looked like. And then that's another problem where then if and this is kind of what you're saying, where if you don't know the history, then the client can just make changes and you have no way to defend it. But then if you get so far into that side that you say the aesthetics don't matter, then the client can do the same thing again. And
it's true. I had that. Yeah.
And that's what all I was gonna say is that's what I love about your work, is that I feel like you found that balance where the history, the ideas, the theories are actually completely embedded in the visuals also.
Oh, that's kind of you. But maybe it was another teacher who told me that then when I was at the Jan van Eyck, I got really, like you say, really into just ideas and thoughts. And I thought the way things look is not important. And then Arma Mavis, who was my tutor at the time, who you should talk to.
Yeah.
He said to me, "Oh, Sarah, you're not a designer. You're an artist.
Oh, wow.
You don't care. It doesn't matter the way it looks for you." And that really made me start thinking. Yeah.
And
what he meant. And then I think it was really important, because then after I graduated, I went to the UK and met people like James Goggin, where we shared a studio, or Fraser Muggeridge. But the first week I moved there, Fraser was a friend of mine from Amsterdam. Stuart Bailey recommended me.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, it's a long story. The reason I went to the UK is because I got a job working for Daniel Eatock, who was running Foundation 33.
Right.
And his design studio that he was running from his he was living in it together with his partner. Sam Solhag was an architect. And so they had written something for the very early issues of ...
Mm-hmm.
And I graduated at the Jan van Eyck and was looking for a job, and Stuart said, "Oh, you should meet Daniel Eatock, you have really similar work." And I emailed them. This was at the beginning of email, saying, "Oh, are you looking for anybody?" And Sam replied saying, "No, we're not hiring any interns." And I said, "Oh, I'm looking for a job." And they said, "Oh, maybe if you're in London one day, just let us know." So I just went.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, made an appointment. knocked on their door, and we got on so well. And then I got a job there and moved there.
Oh, that's
just with one suitcase. Thinking, I thought, why not for 1 year rather than going back to Belgium?
yeah. I mean, I had no idea that you were involved with Daniel Eatock and Stuart Bailey. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like, Stuart and Daniel and ... and all of those people have, I kind of I'm a little bit younger, so I kind of came to their work after ... had already been going for a while.
Yeah.
But that was so influential to changing how I thought about design. Were you aware at the time of kind of how they were kind of doing
No,
some things differently?
I was a bit annoyed at them.
Oh, why?
Now I look back and I read those issues and I think, oh my God, they're so good. But I remember when Peter Bilak and Stuart Bailey launched the first issue at the Yamanek when I was there. And me and a bunch of friends were just huffing in the back row saying, who are these arrogant guys with their magazine? And then,
Oh, wow.
yeah. Yeah. No, it's a totally amazing team.
Yeah. I mean, so
then I moved to the UK, and the first week I was there, Fraser Marguerite called me up because he had been to Reading with Stuart Bailey. They were in the same class.
Okay.
And he said, oh, I'm giving a party in my studio. Do you want to come? I had never met him. He really taught me a lot about typography.
This is interesting, it's interesting that these were the people that you kind of started your early career with.
Yeah.
Because I feel like something that's always interesting to me are people who are designers, but then also kind of doing a bunch of other things. So you also do a lot of teaching, and you co-founded a publishing venture. Do you think that type of practice was really born out of those kind of working with those people right after you had graduated?
Probably, yeah. I think Daniel definitely was influential.
Yeah.
Because when I was working there, we were just the four of us. So there was also Hannah Werning. She was a Swedish designer.
Okay.
And we do things like big corporate jobs for television at the same time as doing, like one day, they were doing roadworks in the street. And I remember Daniel printed off a piece of paper that said treasure and went to put it in the hole in the street and things like, he would constantly make his own work. He's kind of become an artist now, I guess.
Yeah.
Just the fact of taking that as seriously as, TV jobs.
Right.
It kind of opened my eyes, I guess. And also the fact that they never really said no. So when a client would ask, oh, have you done motion graphics? They'd just say, oh, yeah. And then just call up some friends. There was this kind of openness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I remember one day we had to pitch for Piaggio, the scooters. And all these fancy executives came to our office. And we just called all our friends to come on their laptop to sit in the studio to pretend we were like a big office.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
I guess in London there was this kind of energy, because it's quite a tough city, of people supporting each other also. There was a kind of community around like Magma bookstore, and I don't know.
Yeah. So where I'm trying to just kind of piece together your career to kind of bring us to the present day. How did I'm going to ask kind of three questions. You can answer them however you want to. When did you decide to kind of go on your own and open your own studio or work independently? And then when did teaching and occasional papers fit into that?
I only worked for Foundation 33 for a year and a half.
Okay.
And then I met James Goggin at an opening of a design show one night, and we got talking. He had been to the Royal College together with Dan. I think it was a year below or above him, so they knew each other. And James and I had both designed a cloud for the weather. I had done it for TV, and he had done it for himself, so we kind of started talking about that.
Okay.
And he said he had just moved back from New Zealand. And he said, "Oh, I really need to get a studio space, but I've got too much work on. Why don't we share a space and I can pass you on some work? Because I can't afford to hire someone, and I can't afford to hire a studio by myself."
Right.
That was like the perfect way. I couldn't say no to that. It allowed me to sort of start my studio with a little bit of knowledge that there might be work coming from him.
Right.
She did. That's when we started doing the file notes for Camden Art Center.
Okay.
We shared a studio with Paul Elliman actually as well.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he was never around. He was always traveling.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a tutor of mine at the Jan van Eyck.
So, I mean, it's interesting then that you really have, I guess I did not realize how, these designers, Paul Elliman, Daniel Eatock, James Goggin, Stuart Bailey, all had these kind of expanded practices, and you were just kind of right in the middle of that the whole time, kind of, working in that same mode right from the beginning.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you don't really think about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I started teaching quite soon after.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, at St. Martin's first and then the RCA a bit later.
Okay.
And the occasional papers only came in 2008.
Okay.
1808, yeah.
And what was the goal for occasional papers, or what were you kind of interested in that led to that starting?
I started it together with my partner, Anthony Hudek, who is now my husband.
Okay.
We fell in love. Well, we met actually. It's a funny story. I went back to Jan van Eyck in 2007 to give a talk, and he was in the audience.
Oh wow!
So he asked me a question, and that's how we met.
Oh, that is the best story.
Yeah, and then
I love that.
Yeah, it was about Marcel Brotaars, the Belgian artist. Oh, wow. Anyway, we got together, and Anthony always had dreamed of doing publishing. He's an art historian. He was in the theory department.
Okay.
And it seemed like the perfect thing for a graphic designer and an art historian to do together.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to spend time with someone like.
Right.
Yeah. So, and we both felt like there were not enough books about histories that are forgotten.
Right.
Especially in art history and design history. It's always the same 5 famous people who get rehashed.
Right.
And so many people who are too shy or bad at promoting themselves or, have not the right color or gender get forgotten.
Right.
And that coupled with the fact that a lot of design books are just too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the drive behind it.
I mean, and so like how many... I have another kind of series of questions around this, but how much of your time is spent kind of working on the publishing venture versus client work? And then how many books are you publishing a year?
I'd say it's about half a day or a day a week. We have a really great, what do we call her? Distribution manager called Piper, who works in London, and we have a desk in London still because we now live in Antwerp.
Right.
And she does all the, when someone orders a book online, she'll do it. And, deal. At the moment, we are working on the reprint of Richard Hollis's About Graphic Design, and
nice.
She's gone to his studio yesterday to do some more corrections because we're adding a text and doing some text corrections.
Oh, that's great.
She'll do things like that. And we're designing a new website at the moment with Piper and her partner Sam, who's a designer.
Okay.
And the books, we publish about 4 or 5 a year, I would say.
Okay.
It's quite flexible, and we don't really have a plan. They just sort of happen.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask, is how you kind of pick.
No.
Okay.
We did have a moment maybe 2 or 3 years ago where we did a bit more, but we accepted also submissions. But they become tricky because usually people come with an idea and with a budget, and then you start to feel like they're your client, or
Right.
that's why we started doing occasional papers. It's also called occasional for a reason, because they're books that we really want to do, and
Right.
yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about your book, Graphic Design History and the Writing, because I don't know for sure, but that book might be when I first kind of became aware of you and your work. And that's a book that I always have out. I feel like that's always out on my desk or off the shelf because I'm kind of referring back to it. Where did the idea for that come from, and how did you kind of start thinking about how you were going to select the text that you included in there?
I guess Anthony is a big reader. Like in art history, that's a very common thing to do.
Right.
So, and in 2008, I organized a conference together with Fraser about book design for St. Bright Library, which is an amazing typography library in London. And they asked, well, maybe they didn't. I thought it'd be a nice thing to do it again, but about history. Because at the time, there was really nothing it was not a subject whatsoever.
Right.
And I invited Catherine de Smet, who's a really amazing French design historian, to organize it with me. So I guess that was 2011 or 2010 maybe.
Okay.
And while we were preparing the conference, Catherine was kind of feeding me stuff to read. And we realized that there wasn't a book that was collecting all this stuff.
Right.
And that it would maybe be nice to try and bring it out in time for the conference as a kind of thing to educate people coming to the conference, so that we could refer to it, or we'd have a kind of common source book or something. We didn't manage to do that, but we did it. We made it anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of all of the articles we could find in the English language. So there were some in French too that we found, but we didn't have the budget to translate it. And then, we don't speak that many other languages. So that was kind of the limit. And we also did a workshop with students from Eatock and from the RCA critical writing course, asking them to submit articles just to try and broaden the horizon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what I love about it is that it's not a book. It's not a history book. It's actually a book about design history, and it kind of asks all these questions, because in my own education, I was kind of learned a very single linear design history, that it was like this thing happened, then there were these designers, and then this thing happened. And I think reading through the essays in History and the Writing is you realize that history, there's actually kind of multiple design histories, and there's even questions about what should be included in design history. And so it's almost this kind of meta book about how you even think about design history.
Yes, that's what we wanted to do. It's a historiography.
Yeah.
It's how to make history, yeah.
And I'm curious, how do you, this is going to be a kind of weird question perhaps, but how do you, I always wonder how you kind of select a group of writings and kind of, say that these are important without saying that these are the only ones that are important. Do you know what I mean? Like, how did you make that selection and not say this is the design history, but this is kind of one way to look at history?
There isn't that much else out there.
Okay.
We didn't leave out that much. Because it's writing about how to write.
Right.
And it's published. So I guess that's a filter. We didn't just do an open call for everybody to submit whatever. It's all been published, so it's been edited and, gone through a kind of value evaluating system, I guess. I think maybe we left out 5 articles or something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. When I showed it, I recently started doing a PhD, and I showed this book to my mentor, who's an art historian, and she's like, "Are you joking that it all fits into one book. And I'm like, yeah.
What are you doing a PhD? Or what are you studying in your PhD program?
It's a practice-based PhD, so
Okay.
making my work as part of it. But
Okay.
the other part is the beginnings of graphic design in Belgium in the 60s and 70s, and I'm trying to research designers who cross disciplines.
Oh, interesting.
I'm spending a lot of time with this one guy called Paul Ibu, who sees himself as an artist, a designer. He has like 20 names. He called a multi-artist.
Okay.
And there are some other people like that. Yeah, I'm just interviewing people and trying to hopefully make an exhibition or something about their work.
Yeah. I mean, this is actually so interesting because the next question that I wanted to ask you, I love that this program is a practice-based program, because I'm kind of curious, and this is a question I ask a lot of people, is how does, specifically how did collecting and editing graphic design history in the writing, but then also just your work as a publisher and a teacher, how has that changed how you thought about your actual design work, your work for clients? If at all.
It's hard to say. I think the easy thing to pinpoint would be that maybe I feel more confident in talking about content.
Interesting.
Or even editing.
Yeah.
And on the one side, and on the other, I do have experience in distribution. Right. So now clients often ask me, I had a discussion earlier today with the Liverpool Biennial, who we designed for a long time. They're asking me about, how to distribute the book or...
Right. Do you think it changes the types of clients that you get because clients know that you do all of these other things?
Yeah, it totally does. Yeah, I think you get what you make.
Right.
I've been offered to do this kind of branding job recently, and I've been really wondering if I should do it or not, and talking about it for hours with my partner, and he's like, well, once you start doing those jobs, those are the jobs you're gonna get.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I have just a couple questions to kind of wrap up a little bit, and these are kind of questions that I ask everybody, but I'm really curious how you talk about kind of design theory and history and these other interests you have when you are working with clients. Do you talk about these things when you're pitching work or when you're presenting work, or does it just kind of happen in the making part? And then,
no,
when
you talk about it.
Okay.
It's mostly at initial stages. When you're making something, you might show what other people have made before. Or when we started doing wheels, the identity for the art center in Brussels, before even designing anything, I gave it's kind of ridiculous, but I gave Dirk Snauer, the director at the time, an article by Nick Bell for I on branding institutions, and he took it. And then I gave like a little talk about branding of art centers like MoMA and Central Park too, and then as a way to start talking about what we were gonna do, and sort of what it does or what it means or where they want to put themselves, or
Oh, that's amazing.
Or the same, like today we were talking to Liverpool Biennial about biennial catalogs, and was referring to that Documenta catalog that Edward Shea designed the cover for.
Yeah.
It's like an orange ring-bound one.
Yeah.
You should look it up, don't you know? And they didn't know it. This young curator never heard of it. And wow. It's so cool, blah blah. And then so yeah. I guess, or the other day we were doing some exhibition graphics for the welcome in London.
Mm.
It's like a medical center, an exhibition space. I'm like, oh, I really want to make a mobile, and like then they show them some Minari examples.
Right.
You know,
Right.
Bruno Minari mobiles. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's great.
it's inspiring. That's all. And
Yeah.
you don't want to be ripping them off, so you want to, need to
Right.
know what's come before you.
I'm curious this is a question that I ask everybody, but I'm curious for you, what do you think are the issues or the topics that designers should be talking about, writing about right now? What's kind of missing in the design discourse that you think we should be talking about more?
I don't know. Where is the design discourse?
I mean, I guess that's a great question too. I mean, do you think, are there?
I guess, yeah. Sorry.
I mean, no. I mean, I think actually like a really interesting question. Especially kind of hearing about your time in London and how there was this kind of community and everyone was supporting each other. One thing that I found as I've talked to more and more people is that while there's a lot of people talking about design and writing about design right now, it's also scattered and diverse.
Yeah. Yeah.
That there almost isn't kind of a central discourse anymore.
No, maybe that's a good thing, no?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I definitely don't think it's bad, but it does make it hard to kind of find, different topics or different subjects because there isn't kind of central. There isn't a ... that's kind of collecting something interesting or something like that.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that there are many of them now.
Yeah. What are
I
the?
guess maybe that some of the things, yeah, design from outside our Western field would be a really big one.
I think that's something I've been thinking about a lot and kind of for me now, I've done almost 60 of these interviews and while I've gotten a pretty good range of people from around the world at different points in their career who are kind of doing different things, it's still very European and American. And I'm trying to kind of expand that more because it does feel like, all of the design discourse is European and American right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I don't either. That's what I'm trying to. That's something I've been thinking about a lot.
We're working on a book with occasional papers on graphic design education.
Oh, interesting.
And they include some articles about there's a design school in India, and I forget the name that the Eames is taught at.
Oh.
We're asking a designer from there to write about it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's great. My last question is, and this is something you've kind of been answering throughout, so there might not be more to add, but I'm very curious kind of who are the writers, the critics, the historians, the designers who have really influenced you, or the ones that you kind of are required reading for your students or for people listening to this who are interested in the type of work that you do and the types of things we've been talking about. Who are those people that we should be reading or looking at?
Oh dear, I'm gonna say 5 people and then regret it afterwards. Someone did this once to me, and then it was actually, I don't know if this is interesting, but there was once a TV program in Belgium, a series about designers, and they were 10 designers, and one of them was me, and I was the only woman in the series. And they asked me the same question on the spot. It was like a 1-hour documentary about my work. And then they asked me, who are your heroes? And I just blurted out 10 guys. And then they filled half of the program with pictures of those guys. So now I feel like I should prepare my list carefully and tell you, because I feel like just saying people that you would know.
Right.
Like Richard Hollis is like a total hero, but I also, maybe I should think about it. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know that is, I know I always save this question for last and it always ends up being the hardest question and everybody basically says the same thing, where they say a bunch of people and then we're done talking and they think of, 10 other people.
Yeah, okay, maybe we can just list the people in the reader, but that's maybe a bit boring. I don't know. I guess listen to you. That's what I get my students to do. I don't know. Who is it today that you need to? Who would you listen to?
The people that I'm really interested in are twofold. I'm interested in a lot of the kind of newer, younger designers who and design writers, and there are people I've talked to, like Hannah Ellis is someone whose writing I like a lot, and Theo Inglis is someone whose writing I like a lot. But I'm finding more and more that the kind of critical writing, or the discourses that I'm drawn to, are kind of outside of design. It is the writing about art, or writing about movies, or writing about technology, and there's so much relationship to design that I'm getting just as much from those kind of adjacent fields as I am from, kind of quote unquote traditional design writers.
What do you mean by getting as much? What do you get?
Kind of thinking about ways of practice, or ways of thinking about process, especially. So, reading about film or media, there's a lot about kind of working and voice and process. But then I've been reading a lot of technology writing, and find that a lot of the implications of technology and how technology is kind of influencing the world and the way we communicate with each other are also design problems in a lot of ways. And so I'm finding that a lot of the discussion that's happening in the technology world could actually be applied to the design world, I think. Not all of it, but I think a lot of it.
Where would you read that technology stuff?
That's also the same problem that design's having, where there isn't a centralized place. I think Vice has a really good technology vertical called Motherboard, which has some good technology writing. There's somebody that I interviewed back a long time ago. She's the 4th or 5th interview. Sarah Watson is a technology critic, and I can send you this too. Wrote this big piece on kind of how technology writers should be writing about technology today, and there's all kinds of links in there of specific people who are kind of doing very interesting, deep, critical technology writing that has really affected the way I think about design writing and what design writing should do and how it should relate to the field.
Nice.
Thank you so much for this. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while, and I thought this was so interesting to hear your background and hear your work now. So thank you for talking.
Thank you.
This episode was recorded on October 23rd, 2017. Our theme music is by Andy Borgasani. We're on Twitter and Instagram at Surface Podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts and SoundCloud, and at scratchingthesurface.fm. Thanks for listening.